Welcome to the Faculty Focus podcast, live from our annual Faculty Research Day with your hosts
Marleen
and
Teun,
highlighting the research of our professors and PhD researchers.
Hi, good afternoon. Our first guest on the podcast today is Professor Hans de Loof. He works as an associated professor at the Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences at the University of Antwerp. In half an hour, he's going to give a presentation on the topic from research to real-world impact in pharmaceutical care, and was kind enough to first come to the podcast. Welcome, Professor. So, imagine that we are chatting on the train during your daily commute. And I know nothing about pharmaceutical care or research. How would you explain your research to me?
Okay, it's probably good to first say in which context pharmaceutical care is actually practiced. And everybody who has a bit of experience knows that we have very good drugs, some better than others, but that in the real world they're being used in a bad to extremely bad way. There's a huge problem of side effects that are preventable, of misinformation, of adherence problems, and pharmaceutical care tries to fix that. And it's a complex problem, so we need a complex solution. And that's what this pharmaceutical care is all about, and we have to do some research to do this in a smart way.
All right, thank you. Well, in preparation of this interview, I looked at your slides and I saw a quote: "It is easy to get 1,000 prescriptions, but hard to get one single remedy." Can you tell us why you chose this quote and what it means to you?
Yeah, it's a Chinese proverb, and Chinese proverbs are easy. You can get Chinese proverb for anything you want, so that's why I choose this one.
Yeah.
No, it's just that part of the problem, and I didn't mention it, is that prescriptions are done also in a rather bad way, often, not always, and there's a need for second opinions, for balance, for control, and that is also an aspect of pharmaceutical care, obviously.
Yeah.
So getting a prescription is not enough to use drugs in a responsible way. That's quite obvious.
Yeah, and is it that also one of the reasons that you really are fond of the medication reviews? Can you maybe explain a little bit that concept and why it's so important?
Yeah, medication review it's not a new concept. It's a difficult concept to explain briefly, and that's a problem. It's actually a complex intervention because the problem is complex. It has been filled in on different places around the globe in slightly different ways, and it's good to know about that. We actually published something about that to try to detangle a bit the confusing nomenclature on this topic. So it's a matter of sitting and chatting to the patient and trying to really get a grip of what is his total medication use and how does he use it, how often, for how long, and try to understand if the patient is okay with that, if he wants to change something, if he has side effects, and then after a thorough talk, you can get some action planning together with information you may or may not receive from a medical file or a physician. And then you can try to fix certain of these things. And it's very obvious that there are lots of problems that surface when you take the time and when you see the whole picture. And that what medication review should be all about.
And is there a way to feed that information back to physicians or pharmaceutical companies?
It's absolutely necessary that physicians should know about the thing. In certain places there is feedback and there is a collaboration, and this is what we want to get to in the long run. That aspect is difficult because if we have to wait until they ask us to do the medication review, it's not going to happen. And if we start them and we want full cooperation from the beginning, it's not going to happen. But in the end, we should have the collaboration and people who pay for these services, and I think it would be a good investment, they should pay for the collaboration and not for the intervention on its own. So pharmaceutical industry is actually realizing that adherence is a problem also for very expensive medicines, and they they also are starting to look at interventions to make sure people continue to take their expensive drugs, which may be beneficial for people, but is also beneficial for companies.
For the company as well, of course.
We shouldn't fool ourselves. But if this is in an academic setting with people who take this into account, there's probably not a problem there. But the problem is so big that Big Pharma is absolutely getting interested in this topic. Okay. Not for the very cheap medications, obviously.
Obviously. But it's good to show the relevance of it, of course.
Certainly, yeah.
So if you could dream, what does a perfect future look like to you when it comes to pharmaceutical care?
It's a situation where people are paid to deliver a service, not to just move boxes. And this would take away the incentive, more is better. The other way around, it's not the inverse that is better. You can start deprescribing and harming the patient too. And it happens from time to time. So in an ideal world, the individuality of the patient is taken into account to a much higher degree, so we can tailor the monitoring, tailor the education that is actually needed for the effect of the drugs to be the least amount with the maximum effect. That's what needs monitoring.
So a bit with the cancer therapies that are individualized already,
Yeah.
then on a larger scale for all the medicines available.
Yeah, there is individualization, and I will not talk about that this afternoon from a genetic point of view, but there is also from a social point of view a need for very major effort to individualization and to actually go to the patient instead of waiting until the problem and the patient comes to us. So accessibility of care is a very big thing, and is actually one of the main assets of the pharmacy, and we should in the future try to keep this alive.
And focus on it a bit more maybe. Yeah.
And what do you think is the role of the government in this story, in the pharmaceutical care?
Well, it's kind of obvious that the government now pays a lot of money for medicines, and they should also be interested in having this investment being used in a good way. So it's a matter of doing science to convince the government that it's not only the boxes that have to be paid, it's the service that surrounds it. So in that sense, I think this research is important, and we hope to be impactful in the future, that this shift from volume to services is possible. And then we have a single-payer system in Belgium, which is an advantage and a disadvantage. And we see in other countries where there's not a single payer that certain insurance companies start reimbursing these services because they know it's a win-win. That's the future.
All right. And do you think there are AI tools in the future as well, especially for self-care?
Well, AI is here to stay. It's a fascinating subject, which I have been actually following for a long time. And there are hiccups and winters and summers, and we are living an AI summer.
True.
And it's quite obvious that it's very handy. It can be used. It can fool people in a major way, and we should actually be very proactive and not wait until people have been fooled. But
of course.
I think in the future we may actually have an AI possibility for the people who are waiting in the pharmacy, so they can ask their questions, get some answers, and then you come to the pharmacist who will immediately know what the questions are the patient has. And then we can see if some of these answers are okay or not. And this could be a huge time saver and could decrease the risks of using these things. But it's obvious that there's a lot of data in these large language models. It's possible to extract it in different ways, which is not the purely scientific way, and we should realize that. But they can be extremely handy, and it's maybe a bit humbling, but we haven't done that. We have asked these questions and see if we get decent answers, and the average is pretty okay. We haven't compared this with asking the same questions to real pharmacists and compared, but I'm not sure what the answer would be there. But it's not perfect, but the real world is not perfect either. So we have to take the best of both worlds.
I'm now imagining a robot when I enter the pharmacy, asking me those questions.
But it's not only going to be in the pharmacy.
No, of course not.
And we have electronic prescriptions that can give commands to a robot, and then it comes out in a self-driving car or whatever, and it delivers it at your home. That's very realistic in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, well.
But the biggest problem there is probably who has the end responsibility.
That's a job of the government, but responsibility is going to be by multiple people who know what they're talking about. And one of the dangers of AI is that we will probably lose our touch with the real data, and we'll have a hard time ourselves interacting with the output. So critical thinking is a major skill that all the students should master even more than today.
Yeah, true. If we step back a little bit and look at your journey, your career, it's quite amazing. Can you tell us a little bit more about the role of a citizen scientist?
Yeah, well, this is a term that was not used when I put this label on two of my papers that I will very briefly show this afternoon. There are actually more than two of them. And it's, I was in the pharmacy, but I was still talking and connected with my old bosses. I live in Bruges. Bruges is a nice place. People like to visit, and that makes that we actually did some science in our living room when they visited me.
Right.
So my journey is not typical, but I mean, what is constant is the love for science. That's obvious.
Yeah, and computers then maybe.
You can do a lot of computers. You can do a lot of science with computers, and that's a practical matter that I will briefly explain. Is that when I started my PhD, I had to do some biophysical measurements with a protein, apolipoprotein A1, that I should have gotten from a lab in Germany, and I never got
Received
any decent amount. So by that time, I was fooling around with my computer that I bought with the money I earned as a last year student in a toxicology lab. And it was me and my computer. And
something included with alcohol, I remember.
That's another story.
An inside joke.
But I mean, that's the. I'm always envious of the physicists who can do science with a piece of paper and a pencil. I need a computer for that, but it's you have full control, and it's handy. It was actually extremely handy to get my PhD finished rather independently in a short amount of time.
You write about Plan B in your abstract. How important is it? To have the Plan B.
That's the Plan B, because the measurements never really got hold of. So
how important is it to be flexible in a PhD?
That's obviously very important.
Yeah.
It's a good to be focused on not only your very, very specific topic, and to have a broader mind and learn some other skills when you still have time. Yeah. Plan Bs are important.
Well, and our final question is actually a broad question. Is there a story or a fun fact about research that we haven't asked about, but you think our listeners would love to hear?
Well, there's a funny story how I got actually started as a PhD.
All right. It's nice to see that you smile when you remember it.
Yeah, I had a good time as a student.
Okay.
Nothing very wild, but I had a good time. And there were my results at the university were rather average.
But you passed, that's the most important thing.
For example, in the second year, I had been sick for a long time, which had an impact. So when the person in our year who had the most points was asked by a professor don't you want to start a PhD? She said, "This is nothing for me. You should take this guy." So,
thank you. Yeah.
So I see this person from time to time. She's an extremely good pharmacist.
You have given her flowers already, no?
So that's luck. That's coincidence.
Yeah.
So that's. But there's more luck involved than this, but it's kind of a nice story.
Yeah, true, definitely. Thank you for this talk, and good luck.
Thanks for the opportunity.